want to get John in there, but yes,
definitely. Okay, so I think we're live now. It says that we are on YouTube, so we'll see what's going on. I don't know exactly how this plays. I guess I could open up my own YouTube window and just check that out. But so
we are nothing if not professional, folks.
Yes, and we are definitely not professional. No. So yes, as you can see, we've got Mr. John Kitley trying to enter the classroom. Apparently,
we're live.
Yeah, I see that on my screen. But yeah, he's trying to get into the classroom. But again, our classroom is a locked door or a locked room, and only we have the key. No, but yes, welcome. Hopefully we'll be able to get John Kitley back in here. And for some reason I'm frozen. But what is going on? Okay, now we're back. I froze and then we unfroze. This is going great, by the way. Welcome, allegedly, to Accademia Giallo, the live Sunday school edition, where we are going to be talking about Sergio Martino's 1972 thriller, Your Vice is a Locked Room, and Only I Have the Key. Now, this is another one of those instances. I can't remember which movie it was. We were talking about a couple shows ago. It might have even been a Hammerland, Aaron, but this is one of those titles that I can never keep straight. I keep saying my vice is a locked door, but which made it terrible looking on Google to find, images for this, because I would literally get images of locked doors and safes and, security companies. No. So set this up for us, Aaron. I realize that we don't always do a great job of actually synopsizing the movies we're talking about until like halfway through, so people watch this and like, what are they even going on about? So would you be good enough to synopsize, spoilerish or not, who cares, about this movie? I care about this movie. I'm saying if you're watching this and you have not watched this film, please tune back after you've seen it.
I have to say first, before Aaron jumps in, I love Aaron's synopsises, or however you say it in plural or whatever. Like when he was doing my show, I would just okay, here's a professional talking about the film. Let me just hang back and let him do his thing.
I love that not only am I being thrown under the bus,
you're being asked to drive the bus.
Right. In terms of doing an impromptu synopsis, but then I'm getting all built up by Bryan. So this is good. And I've got John texting me. And it says, he says that it says it's waiting on the host. So back to you. I'm throwing you under the bus now while I
all right, just tell him after you. Well, maybe Bryan, you want to do the synopsis, or maybe you text Kitley. I don't know.
Yeah,
because I keep seeing him pop up, and I keep clicking add to stream, and he's just not. It's not doing anything.
Not sure. As everybody in the audience can see, this is we can see John Kitley trying to enter the stream, and you shouldn't cross the streams, but that's another movie.
Yes,
this movie, Your Vice is a Locked Door, and Only
Locked Room.
Locked Room. Sorry, Your Vice is a Locked Room, and what I was getting stuck on was is it and Only I or I Only? Which is it?
I think it's Only I. Yes.
Only I. Okay. And Only I Have the Key. So it begins with our frustrated author. Oh, see, I don't know anybody's name. Luigi Puzzilli. Let me go back really quick. Anyway, his name is
Oliviero.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which it said so nicely. And he is married to Irina. And he is a frustrated author. He hasn't published in quite a while, hasn't been published in quite a while, hasn't written in quite a while. And he seems only to be capable of throwing these extravagant parties with counterculture types who love to come and drink his wine while he abuses his wife in front of them, emotionally and physically. What we quickly find out is that he's basically impotent with her, but he still manages to get it up for some of the other ladies in town. But one of said ladies is bumped off, and that kind of kicks things into gear, because we get it's a murder that's committed with a curved blade. We see not who has committed it, but we see the crime committed. and just as and then their maid is murdered as well. So it's like, like suddenly we have a serial killer on our hands, and all evidence seems to be pointing toward Oliviero. There's John Kitley.
Jesus Christ.
Party.
Welcome. Sorry, I don't know what happened there, but I'm glad you're able to get on finally.
I just turned my phone on and off. For some reason, it was saying it wasn't connecting, and I came down and I'm
frozen.
Oh
no. But I love his shirt, though.
Yeah, it's a good shirt. And are you back?
Yes.
I think
so. We'll make this work. We got an hour.
Hold very still so that we don't know if you're frozen or not.
No, don't do that, Dave.
That's the face of shock as the curved blade comes down.
So we have a serial killer on our hands. It looks like it's Oliviero. We're not sure. And the police are starting to investigate, and Irina thinks it's him as well, or so we might think. And then the niece shows up, played by Edwige Fenech. The niece is Floriana, and she is a free spirit. She will go to bed with anybody, including everybody.
Including Bryan. No. Help me out with this. This is something that I was waiting to talk to you guys about, because she refers to Oliviero as Uncle Oliviero, and Oliviero's mom was it Aunt Esther? Mm. Are they blood relatives? Am I to understand this is a movie that's kind of about incest and reveling in it?
I don't know that we know. I mean, he could be an uncle by marriage.
This is literally the setup for like any Pornhub video.
How do you know that, Bryan?
I mean, I did the research. So.
Yeah, painstaking.
Anyway,
I'm sure.
I don't think it's explicitly stated that they are blood relatives, but they are certainly familial and familiar.
Oh yeah. She definitely gets a taste of the old family tree.
Hello.
But this movie is it's a trip. It's the cat's meow, as they might say. But there was a point about 3/4 of the way through this thing where I was about ready to give up.
Really?
Yes. But now that after finishing it, I realized that I was being suckered in the exact way that Martino wanted me to be suckered, in the idea that, wait, this is it. This can't be it. Yeah, this is kind of it. Oh, this is not it. Wow. It reminded me of, I think this is, if I remember correctly, sort of a parallel to The Strange Vice of Mrs. Wart, where we have, again, according to our Accademia Giallo bingo, a pair of killers. A pair of co-conspirators at the end. And yes, we'll just talk spoilers. Maybe if there's anything that you guys want to hold back on, feel free to. I will honor that. But I will say there's some nice twists towards the end that recall some of the stuff we saw in that movie, but also take it to, they have a twist on that twist, especially as concerns our beloved Miss Fenech. So, first of all, I didn't do a great job of introducing you guys, mostly because I wanted to make sure everyone was in the room. But we have Bryan Martinez of the Giallo Room and Film Deviant.
Hi.
We have we have Aaron Christensen of Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and we have John Kitley of Kitley's Crypt, down in the crypt. How you doing, sir?
Good. Finally.
Yes. So we've got the synopsis, the high level from Dr. AC. So let's start off with the way that we kind of kick things off normally. This was the first time that I'd seen this film. I watched part of it last night and I finished it up this morning. No, actually, I watched all of it last night. I divvied up another film. I'm running on very little sleep, as you can probably tell. But you guys have experienced this thing before. This is not a first time for any of you. How many times have you seen it? When was the first time you saw it? And where was this in your Giallo education?
Who wants this one first? Bryan.
I'll go for it.
Or John, please.
Yeah.
I think this is about, I just rewatched it a couple of days ago, and I think it's probably the third or fourth time. back when you were when you're looking out for Italian movies, you're looking for any title that you can come across, and even the ones that have the weird titles like this one is going to spark your attention. But I probably didn't appreciate it the first time I had seen it because I was a lot younger and not as versed in the subgenre. But I think this is a prime example, like you mentioned, Ian, with Strange Case of Mrs. Ward or Strange Vice, that you have no idea where the story's going. And just when you think you do, it takes another left turn and then another left turn. And that's one of the things that I love about this style is you really have no freaking clue of where it's going to go. And the best part is, like, even in this one, you see the killer and you're going, I can see who the killer is. This
Right.
is kind of not, there's no guesswork anymore. And then you go, oh, okay, this has really nothing to do with the movie. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah. How about you, Bryan?
I watched this one for the first time back in the early mid 2000s. Back when I was a manager at a music store. I used to order, like, they gave you like a catalog to order whatever was popular, but I always thumb through it to like the more obscure stuff. And it was like right when I was collecting a lot of the Anchor Bay stuff. This was originally put out on DVD by, I think, No Shame. And they actually did put out a lot of the more obscure Jolly back in the 2000s, and then Blue Underground kind of took over, and then not recently, but a few years back, Arrow put out an amazing Blu-ray of this film combined with Black Cat. Is sort of like their Edgar Allan Poe double feature or whatever. But I remember, like, much like John, it was like this movie is like a mystery. It takes a lot of elements of Giallo, some gothic stuff, some like whodunit kind of thing. There's a mystery, murder in it, a murder mystery. And it's got a lot of the familiar faces that you see in Jolly. So I think it's one of Martino's more underrated films. Like it certainly, you can see like a lot of elements that he uses in some of his other films in terms of like the double twist ending or the triple twist ending or whatever. But I think this one handles it really well with the almost the Edgar Allan Poe kind of twist at the end with the body in the wall kind of thing. I think it's just a really enjoyable film, and it also has Edwige in a very unconventional role. She's sort of like, she's part of the conspiracy of like the murder conspiracy. So she's not necessarily playing a victim. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of layers to this film. And not to mention, like, she's like top billed, but she doesn't show up until like a half hour in the movie.
30 minutes. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. I was wondering if I was watching the wrong film.
Anita Strinberg is amazing in this film. Her eyes, she just has like the craziest eyes of like any actress that I've seen or whatever. And if you remember, we got a few reoccurring actors from some of our previous Accademia Giallo sessions or whatever. I think Luigi Pistilli is from Bay of Blood. You might remember him from there. Anita Strinberg was in A Lizard in a Woman's Skin, as well as a bunch of other films that we've yet to discuss. And then, of course, Edwige Fenech and Ivan Razumov,
Yes.
one of my favorites of all of film land or whatever. He's great in this. Although he's very brief, but he plays a very pivotal role in the film. So, yeah, when I first watched it, it was like, because, when you're watching Italian films, you don't know what the hell you're going to get thrown. You know what I mean? In terms of like, is this going to be like steeped in supernatural? Are zombies going to show up at some point? Or like, you just don't know. Like, is there going to be cannibals in this film? And then it's like you're pleasantly surprised once the film, gets to its conclusion, because there's so many things happening in this film. So I'm glad you stuck it out, and I'm glad you actually enjoyed it.
Well, I want to put a pin in that supernatural element because I got a question specifically. But before we get to that, AC, how about you?
This was the third time I'd seen it. I think I probably caught up with it when I was going through my, kind of like what you're doing now, Ian, kind of like I got to catch up on the Gialli. And so in the mid to late 2000s, I probably saw it for the first time. I think I saw it as part of the October challenge. And so I was watching, 100 movies, and it didn't really stick with me. But I remember going back, I went back and looked at it and I did like it. I just didn't remember much of it. And then I reviewed the Arrow Blu-ray when it came out a couple of years ago. And once again, I remember really liking it, but sitting down with it again, I'm like, man, I just don't remember what's going to happen, which is fine. It's like the plot twists are once again, working their magic. But this time I was actually wishing that I didn't know about the Edgar Allan Poe connection, because the end, you're kind of like, oh, okay, I know where this is going. There's also a part of me, it's like, why even give credit, why say it's based in part on Edgar Allan Poe's Black Cat, when really it's, there's just little touches of it that have the Poe elements. There's the blinding of the cat, and then there's the bricking up of the corpse in the wall. And other than that, it's in no way related to Edgar Allan Poe. It's the least faithful adaptation of Black Cat probably ever.
And yeah, that's what I was getting at. I don't think I've ever read the Black Cat. For some reason, I thought this was based on the Telltale Heart, but then again, I've read very little Poe. I just mostly know what people have told me about him. So the supernatural angle, is this a supernatural cat, or is it just very resilient and it somehow has 9 lives in the, I guess, non-supernatural sense? Because it's everywhere. It is, it's omnipresent. It survives having its eye and who knows what else damage done to it by those, garden shears. It just seems impossible that it could survive. And yet it was sort of the hovering guilty conscience of the Irina character, who turns out to be, the mastermind behind this entire thing, which is, that's, people talk about what a great revelation Kaiser Soze was. For me, it's it's Irina, because damn it. But yeah, so is there a supernatural take to this, or is that just a flourish, or do you think it was even conscious on the part of the filmmakers here?
Satan.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Satan, yes.
That name was Satan.
True. Very true.
I'm going to backtrack really quick and say that in the Edgar Allan Poe story, the narrator is tormented by the Black Cat that is a favorite of his wife's.
Right.
And he does blind it purposefully, but he's not looking to murder it. He's just looking to kill it, or not looking to murder. He's just looking to injure it. And while she's very great zeal delivering the shears to the eye, I suppose it's possible the cat could have survived. And the fact that it keeps showing up now, had its eye replaced itself, then I would say we had a supernatural element going. But I think it's meant to be set in a realistic world where the cat cats are assholes. We know that. Cats are always showing up when you don't want them to show up, and they're always underfoot, and they're always right where you don't want them to be. So of course the cat is everywhere you don't want it to be.
It's like the opposite of American Express. But I think the thing that made me wonder about this supernatural, Billy, aside from the omnipresence, is the fact that, we see the wound is always like gaping fresh and, as if it had just happened, but the cat's fine, just wandering around, doing that wonderful, horrific meow. I'm not bothered by this. I'm just curious about you guys' perspective. I think it leads to one of the great endings and one of the great non-expected endings, because when the cops show up to her house, and she eventually tries to bribe one of them with vintage wine, and they're breaking through the wall because they hear the cat coming from the other side. Turns out there's other bodies buried in there. There's no grand arrest. There's, she doesn't get shot or, make a run for anything. It just ends with her kind of gripped in this terror of this revelation. So anything could happen after that. We could see a sequel. Maybe at that point she clubs the cops over the head and shoves them in the wall. Who knows?
It could happen. I do say I love the fact that it ends with the Italian title card of fine or fine.
It's fine.
Fine. I'm arrested. Fine. We lost Bryan.
Oh, maybe he just bowed out.
We missed him. I said we've lost him.
Oh, okay.
Totally different.
I'll keep an eye out.
I will say that I think with the ending, irregardless of what she does, I think her mind is completely snapped.
Yes.
So irregardless of whether she gets arrested or not, she's gone bye-bye. I mean, she's completely a mental wreck right at that point. So, it is weird because you don't know if the cat was dead, but if it wasn't dead, how did it get into the tomb? Because she didn't put it in there.
Right.
So it must have crawled in there at some point.
Through a very small hole.
Right. I mean, but that's also, that goes back to the Poe story, is that it's one of those things, again, cats being assholes, where she's turned to, grab a brick, and that's when the cat went in there, because she did brick it up, to seal him in.
But it was obviously alive enough or had to have been alive for the police to hear it.
Right.
Whereas then typically, like in a Poe story, like Telltale Heart, it's only the main guy that hears the noise.
Right.
So,
Telltale Heart, that's true, but Black Cat, the cat is alive. It just gets bricked up in the wall.
Right.
So. And
it was a very powerful, wailing, meowing sound. Here's my question. Irina has snapped, as you say, John. My question is, when did she snap? Because up until the cops show up, when she's just driving home from having tied up all the loose ends, and then the cops are there, and it's this wonderful thing where it's like, oh, we knocked and we were just about to drive away, and hopefully you pulled up. Is that when the guilt or the suspicion finally caught up to her and she just went out of her mind, like, this is just too much to take? Or do you think it was the accumulation of, she had to devise this master plan going all the way back to apparently murdering her husband's overbearing mother, that she was finally able to drop all the pretense, and that's what revealed the madness?
Well, now let me ask you a question about that.
Who are you?
Since this is the first time you watched it.
How'd you get in here?
What's that?
I said, how'd you get in here?
No, it's kind of weird. I guess we're having some weather over here in Berwyn. So it knocked out it knocked out my Wi-Fi, so I had to connect via hotspot on my phone. And then I was like, man, technology is so crazy sometimes. Yeah. But let me ask you a question, Ian. Did you see this as like her being a mastermind, or is she sort of like somebody with a lot of PTSD, and she's getting beaten on, and this guy's treating her like shit, actually, and he's actually not kind of a jerk. He is a jerk. He sleeps with other women. He kind of like he puts on a show, like when there's like other people in the place, like a party or whatever. So he's very demeaning. He's very treating her basically like nothing, right?
He's also a horrible, racist, sexist, public molester. Yeah, I think the answer is both. I don't know how they got together. If there was ever any love or passion there at any point. It's very interesting that Oliviero was at one point a successful writer, apparently successful enough to have this grand estate, and they don't really have to work, and they're living off either money that he's promised to write books, maybe he's under a contract, or they had saved up enough money from previous works, but he's just kind of a loser now, and I think that's his ego is spiraling out of control with the way he treats basically everybody around him, including his wife. He had a very complicated relationship with his mother, apparently. And my reading of it was, and after having only watched the one time, that Irina was psychologically, possibly physically abused by her husband and possibly also her husband's mother. I feel like they were probably alive at the same point. Because I got the feeling that she had died like only a few years earlier, and it sounds like at the end that she was Irina was confessing to having knocked her off or had something to do with that death. So I feel like she was pushed so far,
Right.
and then she just couldn't take it anymore, and she had the resources because her husband, I was going to say her husband was wealthy. I don't know what she did for a living, if she had to work or if she had her own career. They don't really go into what she was all about, but she had the resources to pull this kind of stuff off. She had the cunning and the smarts to do it. So yeah, I think she's the mastermind behind all of this, including, pretending to be vulnerable, continuing to take the abuse, indulging in her own, passions. Like she's sleeping with her husband. She's also sleeping with the niece, ? So yeah, there's all sorts of levels of depravity and deviousness going on in this story, which is one of the reasons by the end I was totally in love with it.
So the question that came to mind, other than kind of setting up the twist ending, was why does she take all the abuse?
I would say, and it's just speculation because we don't really get anything. We don't get a whole lot of depth from these characters, a lot of history, as I'm kind of alluding to. But I would say that she was subject to so much humiliation and abuse that instead of just leaving, she thought, well, why should I go? These people are all awful. I'm going to get rid of all of them and take their resources and, just live my own life. This is payback for all the torment. That's the only theory I've got. I don't know if you guys feel any different.
Right. Well, I mean, but just kind of why put up with it for as long as she does. Because I mean, you kind of hear that this is an ongoing thing, and like every time these people come over, they witness the same kind of scene of him debasing her. So yeah, I'm just kind of like, I mean, again, I understand it's the setup for the payoff, but it does kind of like beg the question of like, why would you do that? Like, where's the upside to the abuse?
Well, I think it's not strictly a revenge play in that she wants to knock everybody off. I think she, on some level, enjoys humiliating her husband. When Floriana shows up, I mean, it's Edwige Fenech, for crying out loud, in these knee-high boots and that, red skirt and that wonderful. I mean, the costume design in this movie is off the chain, right? Yeah. But because the last time he had seen her, she was like the bratty little niece, like a child who gave everybody attitude and was kind of, you say cats are assholes. It sounds like she was too. She was a little adolescent girl.
She still is. I mean, let's be fair.
Yes. But just watching, he's stumbling all over his words and everything like that. He can't quite get it together. And all he wants to do is sleep with her. And I think Irina knows that. And it's worth it to her to see him just made a fool of. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of why I posed the question earlier of like, when exactly she went crazy. Was it before she decided to hatch this plot, and in her madness she decided, I'm going to play the long game and just go through this like humiliation and torture, I'm going to put up with it because it's going to be worth it in the end? Or did it happen later? Or can you hatch this kind of a plot without being insane? All these great questions coming out of this dumb little Giallo movie. And that's not a dig at it. I'm just saying, I don't think you sit down to watch this movie and think there's going to be a lot to think about here, right? Yeah. So yeah,
I would say part of the charm of this is like much like Lizard in a Woman's Skin. Like you're seeing the deterioration of one of your lead roles, right? Like your characters during the progression of the story. You know what I mean? I think it's kind of a treat in that way. You're seeing how this person is just like kind of being driven to madness with all these different elements. Like you have the cat, you have Floriana showing up, you have Oliviero doing his usual abuse to her. So you get to see like just her cracking, and at the very end, and no pun intended, she's at the end of her wits, like when the cops are there, and she's just like, "Fuck this," you know what I mean? Like, I did it, whatever, you know. But you see, like, it's so crazy because like her eyes just convey all of that. Like her eyes convey fear, they convey madness, they convey just about anything, you know. And then like the scene where she's, you know, spoilers, stabbing Oliviero, like her eyes are just like, it's that madness twisted with like, you know, vengeance and all that stuff, everything. It's like, she's such a great, you know, underrated actress, much in the same way, like, you know, Barbara Steele was, in terms of just conveying something with just her face, you know, alone. So,
well, two things with that. One, you know, the movie we talked about last month, Black Sunday, and this film, they're both in love with portraits. You know, Aunt Esther and her dress, it becomes, it's not so much important. It's almost like a red, or I guess a dark blue herring throughout this movie, because you think it's going to have more significance than it actually does. It's just this kind of fetish object with a bunch of the characters. But I'm glad you brought up the death of Olivero, because the movie goes out of its way to show a lot of graphic violence, you know, per giallo, you know, as it's wont to do. But in this case, we stay completely on Irina's face and her body as she drives the, you know, I can't remember if it was the knife or the scissors or what the instrument was, but she stabs him to death as he's kind of passed out drunk at his typewriter, and she stabs him. She's getting to see all the gore and the violence she's perpetrating, but we don't. We're focused on her. So it's like everything else was sort of for entertainment or utility, but only she gets to fully enjoy the fruits of all of her devious labor, which I thought was a nice twist. We get to see the aftermath as she's just kind of like lying but you know, it's a very quick scene. It's not something that I think the audience, at least speaking for myself, we don't like this guy so much that we're waiting for him to get his, hopefully. And he does, but it's not anything grand. We don't see him begging for his life or like falling backwards from multiple stab wounds or something. It all happens off screen, which is, you know, something I was not expecting.
I think it's mainly because they want to focus the viewer on her, because she's the one that finally came to the breaking point where she couldn't take it anymore. Even though she has this plot going on of what she's going to do, she just finally snapped. So I think the attention is more on her, not who she's actually stabbing to death.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And again, this is just a detail that I really felt like the people who are making this movie cared to think about, instead of just making, you know, a slasher picture with some sex in it. That's, as we get into these gialli, I'm appreciating that aspect of it more, and wishing that we had more of a modern equivalent in terms of, I guess, mainstream fare, because it's much smarter than a lot of stuff we get nowadays.
I love the fact that
Absolutely.
right from the get-go, there's really no character in this movie that you're rooting for. I mean,
I was rooting for Brenda. I was rooting for Brenda the maid.
Nice.
That shows you what happened to her. But the one person, Irina, but she's crazy or going crazy, and you almost feel sorry for her. And then when the twist comes at the end, and you're like, "Son of a bitch, I hate everybody in this movie." Other than the old lady that's picking up bottles to recycle, other than her, everybody is just a shit in this movie.
It's true.
I love Dario in this movie. The motorcycle racer. He was great. Like I want to be like Dario.
Him, that's all.
Hell, I envied Dario. Now, when you said Dario, I didn't pick up on that was being his name. I thought you meant Dario Argento made a cameo. I'm like, where did I miss? But no, yeah, you're right. There's only two, I think, virtuous or somewhat virtuous people in this movie, possibly three. You've got the old lady collecting bottles. Dario, he fell for Floriana, but he was just, you know, he got along with Brenda. He was kind of like the innocent, you know, he was an adult man and he kind of slept around. You get the feeling he loved his motorcycles, but he wasn't involved in a plot. And then Brenda, I think her biggest crime was just being the maid in this house and being a woman of color.
Yeah.
I mean, I was it's really strange because you don't see many, black folks in these kinds of movies. And I was kind of like, oh, wow, we've got some, I guess, representation here in 1972 in this Italian film. And I'm like, oh, no, this is not. I kind of wish she wasn't here because every reference to her is derogatory and horrifying. And even I don't want to ascribe any malice to this. It's just one of those, I'll call it an unintentional and unfortunate little bits of information. When she gets stabbed in the stairwell or wherever she is that night, and she's wearing the blue dress after admiring and touching herself in a mirror, I had to go back and watch this a couple of times, not because I'm sick, but because I honestly didn't know what. Well, I didn't know what I was looking at, and it wasn't until I rewound and freeze frame at just the right moment. She gets sliced by this curved blade through the front of her chest. And the only way I could tell is on the freeze frame, I kind of noticed the curve of what would have been the breast. If I'd just been patient and waited another minute, I would have seen her full body like on the ground with the gaping wound. But the dummy that they made up for her literally had like black skin. like it was painted black with this knife through it. I'm like, maybe they were trying to adjust for the fact that it was like a nighttime thing. But looking at the actress who, played Brenda, I was like, no, it's just weird and feels kind of dirty.
You're not wrong.
Well, you're saying that with a film where the blood looks like like Crayola paint or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that was the aesthetic back then. More like kind of in your face, like boom, here it is or whatever.
That could be it too. I mean, there was one scene later on where a character, I don't remember who it was, gets stabbed, and I think it was there's the woman of the night, the call girl who gets stabbed, and the mother finds her and screams, and that's where we have the fake killer death. She had that kind of, it was almost like from Hellraiser, the close-ups of the hooks going through the skin and the flesh is pink. Is that kind of like color misstep, I guess. But yeah, there's just something about Brenda. I may be reading way too much into this from like a 2021 perspective, but I'm looking like that's just not. I would rather they've gone like with cartoon brown than with just black.
With I mean, kind of speaking of, what do you think about the kind of counterculture commentary? Because they like the hippies are represented pretty terribly, but it almost
accurately. I don't know,
almost cartoonishly, and like they burst into, they do nothing. They come around, they drink the wine, they live in a campground, they burst into song, and then they disappear.
Can we not gloss over that scene, by the way? Because that's such a glorious scene.
That scene,
right? Because when I first saw
that scene,
when I first saw this movie, and that happened, like you're watching it, and you're like, I remember the cover for that No Shame DVD was the iconic Edwige sitting on the bed with the cat and everything. So I when that scene happened, when she burst into song, and then the girl steps on the table and starts go-go dancing or whatever.
Yep.
I was like, man, this has all the hallmarks to be the greatest film I've ever seen right here. Because it was just it was enjoyable on that WTF level. You know what I mean? Of what's going on. But no, like to your point, I think the film portrays a lot of different cultural perspectives, especially during the time. This is I think shot in 1971 and released in 72. So there was a lot of that, like jumping into the early 70s, but you still have that hippie culture very much in effect, but almost like tapering off. So like I thought it was a welcome. Like if you ever watch Torso, which I hope we watch some soon, there's a lot of that too, and that's also a Martino film. There's a lot of delving into the hippie background. So I don't know if it was him purposefully injecting that into his film because he found it to be very interesting for whatever reason. But I don't know. I almost look at it as like maybe the Italians got that wave a little later, and they're putting it into the film or whatever, and they're trying to, like when you see like different cultures from different countries of the world, whenever they try to bring in like American culture into their films, it's sometimes done a little bit later, or sometimes done very like overtly or whatever. So it didn't bother me here because part of your head switches off and it's like, I'm watching a film from 1972, so I'm not going to be as bothered by it because it wasn't made today. It was made in a different era, depicting a lot of different social, problematic things or whatever, which I think is pretty often the case in any Italian film that you watch, especially of that decade or whatever, that time.
But why do you think that? Why do you think that he brings it in? I mean, why? I mean, why would Oliviero like want to have these people over to his house? Like, what's the attraction?
I would
dominant. So he can parade around as the host or the king of the castle because his other life is in ruin because he's a failed writer, impotent, or supposedly, and so he brings them around so he can, humiliate his wife and be the star again.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah. It's the whole idea of, he's got the money to be this, kind of a wannabe socialite, offers some free booze and food to a bunch of people who probably welcome the chance to spend the night in a castle instead of an RV or VW bus. And he just probably likes the attention. I need to go back and watch this movie again because in this opening 10 minutes first of all, we open with sex credits, which was always appreciated. Credits going on with like blurry lovemaking in the background. I couldn't tell who was doing what to who. But when this dinner party happens and they all break out into song, I almost got the impression that the hippies were making fun of Oliviero or humiliating him almost in defense of what he was doing to Brenda, the black maid who he was just groping her in front of everybody. But I was kind of frozen in my brain because last month I watched Godspell for the first time, which is right around this same era. And so I got really confused. Again, I wondered if I was watching the same movie because first of all, I'm like, where's Edwige Fenech? Second of all, is this a musical? Did you guys not tell me we were going to go into the realm of musical gialli? and the other weird thing is that it doesn't come back. Like the hippies are one and done in this film. So it's just a little bit of flavor. So I think the next time I watch this, I'll have a better understanding of what is going on because my expectation meter was just all over the place.
I guess that was my point, was that it feels a little bit token in terms of like, we're going to have these kids in here, show how hip we are and or how unhip they are. And then they're going to disappear. And it's like, okay, well, what was we could have done just as well without it.
Well, it does set the stage right away of how much of a shit, what's his name is, the husband is right from the very beginning.
Right.
So I think that might have been the main point of that display or that party. So he could just let the viewer know, hey, I'm the asshole here. So just make sure that there's no, questions. I am the asshole.
Oh, I love it.
I hate to say this. I hate to say this because it's like a film that we have yet to discuss or whatever, but he does the same thing in Torso, where it's like a very, it's like a very prominent hippie thing, and then you never see it again. You know what I mean? So I don't know if he's got a penchant for hippies or something.
Well, I mean, this is where kind of like, it calls like it's the whole Martino, I think, is a populist filmmaker. Like he's doing it for the audience. So throwing this in there for, just like, well, we got to get some hippies in there and let's have them do a song too. Kids like that these days.
That's great.
I will say I wanted to call out some of the writing in this film because it's just beautiful. Like when Edwige Fenech first shows up, Oliviero becomes me, and I assume you at some point, and every other guy who loves Edwige Fenech for those reasons. She says, "Don't," or it's either she or maybe it's Irina, I can't remember, says, "Don't gawk so hard. Any moment you'll swallow a fly." It's just such a wonderful little line. I was like, yeah, that's right.
The other line that she says happens a little bit later that I love, and like
I know
I
what you're
quoted
gonna say.
in the Giallo Room episode of this film. It's something along the lines of like he calls her like a 2-bit whore or something.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, I mean, those are 2 bits well spent. It's just a nice iciness. I love that writing in this film.
Because she just says it right away. It's like she has no shame. She's the free spirit, and she knows the control that she has over herself and pretty much everybody else, is evidenced in this movie. Until it turns out the tables are turned on her. How many T's can I alliterate in one sentence?
That's pretty good.
Well, thank you. I do want to talk about the cat and the eye stabbing scene. Or at least the immediate aftermath, because it has one of the most disturbing images I've ever seen, which is a refrigerator being opened, I think, and a sack being emptied into a dish, and it's sheep eyes in cream.
Right?
This is a thing? Is this a snack?
You've never had that? I mean,
no.
Come on over to my place. I'm having it in about 5 minutes.
Says the vegan.
Yep. Well, they're vegan sheep's eyes. I mean, I'm not a savage.
Plant-based?
Plant-based sheep's eyes. Coming soon from the Quaker Oat Company. No, but that was just such a weird detail. This movie is full of weird details, and I wonder how much of that is to keep the audience off the track of what is going on, because Irina's main plot at the end of it, I could think about it and see how she could have pulled this whole thing off. But were there clues as to her being the string puller this whole time? Because I didn't see them. But I wonder if there were clues, if there were some other points of distraction, like, hey, don't think too much about what Irina's doing. Here's a bowl of sheep's eyes. Right.
I mean, I think you're not far off there. I mean, because I don't think, again, that kind of speaks to my comment about like why she would put up with it as long as she does. I think it's a film about misdirection. We see her fully invested in her role as victim, and whether there's plausible reason for her persisting in that victimhood, it is all about setting us up so our expectations are going one way, so that when the twist happens, it lands. And I feel like that happens throughout. We have Bryan. I was going to ask you, like, who the woman who plays Fausta. Where have we seen her? The lady from the bookstore? Because she seemed very familiar to me, or maybe she's just another lovely dark-haired Italian woman that I wish was in more movies.
That Daniela.
Yeah, I think so.
She was in Paul Naschy's Inquisition.
Okay.
She was the main lead from there, and she's been in a few things. She's worked with. I'm pretty sure she's worked with like Bava and I know Naschy and possibly even Argento. So
I think she might have worked with Larez too. Larez.
Okay. I think she might have been were leaping off the page at me, but I thought she was quite striking and had a nice presence for her small role.
Very small role.
And to your point, AC, just to pause on that, like, I don't necessarily think that Irina knows what she's doing. Like, does any of us like have an indication that she was going to push Walter off that cliff when she did? Like, I think lot of the things that she's doing. Well, yeah, right. But like at the same time, it's like I think she's kind of.
You don't think that was the plan?
No, good. I don't necessarily like. I don't think that was the plan until that day. You know what I mean? For her, like I think. Maybe the excitement of being independent after she kills off Oliviero, that kind of overtook her. So now she's there, and then like Walter is like, this can, we can dump the bodies here and it'd be perfect or whatever. And I think it's like it kind of clicks in her head, like I could just have this all to myself. You know what I mean? and then she pushes him. Like that's my take on it. I don't necessarily think she planned out that advanced or whatever.
Sure.
I think she had the initial plan, but I think it's almost like a victim trying to plan something out. I don't necessarily think that she does this, right? Like we know that her mind state is breaking. So as we arrive at the very end, it's like, she's not, I guess, professional enough with like these crazy conspiracies or whatever, to really, think past, let me just seal these bodies in the wall and then I'll be done with it. You know what I mean? Like I don't think she counted on the cops showing up for animal abuse or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right. Nobody
so
ever
like,
does.
I think like as a very, what's that?
I said, nobody ever does.
Yeah, the cops were very concerned about these animals. I guess it's a pretty low crime area they live in. But no, Bryan, it's a very interesting point as to whether or not Walter was his name, that she wanted to get rid of him, or maybe I don't know if they were lovers or he was just a hired goon. I just want to see the scary movie version of this film where they're standing at the edge of the cliff and he's like, we could dump the bodies here. And she says, that's a great idea. And then she just accidentally pushes them off over the edge. But was she was she going to go back to the house and get the bodies out of the wall and take them and shove them over? Or is she just going to leave them there to rot?
No.
And in that case, was she just going to live in that house? Because
that's what I'm saying.
Oh, I don't.
That's what I'm saying.
Know.
I don't think I don't think she was stable enough to really think that through. You know what I mean? She's like, as she's driving home from pushing Walter off the cliff, you could see she's very kind of excited. She's living off of her high of what, like, before it was like, holy shit, I didn't know I had it in me to kill Oliviero. Now it's like it's almost empowering. Like that drive home is very, I think, important to her character because it speaks on like, she's kind of going off the cuff at this point. And, like her mental breakdown hasn't come full circle until, the cops uncover the bodies in the wall, I think. So, yeah.
Anything's possible. I'm not going to be able to really unpack this until I watch the movie again. But I do want to say, I keep thinking about this question that you posed, AC, about why would she put up with it? And I was struggling to think of the movie that I wanted to reference, and it just popped in there, as Ray Stantz once said. I Spit on Your Grave. The Camille Keaton character, she's a writer going off to a nice idyllic weekend in the woods. She's harassed and assaulted and raped repeatedly and left for dead by a bunch of rednecks, and she goes on this elaborate plan to get revenge after pulling herself back together. I don't remember what the time span was on that movie. It certainly wasn't as long as Irina is playing as far as her long game, but it did speak to her putting herself in danger, having sex with, I think, at least one, maybe even, I think it's just one of the other guys that raped her previously in the film. So putting herself through that again in order to exact this revenge, she had just committed completely to this vision. I don't care what it takes or what I have to go through. I'm going to see this through. We don't get that inner monologue in either of these movies, but you can infer it, because you're right. What self-respecting, sane individual would undergo that, especially if they've already experienced, that kind of trauma?
Well, I guess to your point, and that's an interesting comparison, but I mean, again, there's little to be gained for her. I'm not sure what she's waiting for, what the tumblers are that she's waiting for, because if the plan is to kill Oliviero and Brenda and brick them up in the wall, like, why? She doesn't need to wait for anything.
See, I don't know if she was thinking that forward because she killed Brenda to frame her husband.
Right.
And when that didn't happen, then I think like the next stage of the plan came into being. But we never really know when. I can't remember his name, Walter, Ivan Razumov, when his character actually becomes part of the story.
Right.
Is he there from the beginning, or did he just get hired on at the very end?
Well, he's her lover, I think. I mean, they do have a kiss.
When?
Don't they kiss when after he's done with the oil slick?
Right. But what I'm saying is how far into the beginning of the film was he involved? And even though we don't see it, is he involved in the plot? Where I think she was just slowly edging her way to insanity, where she kills Brenda to frame her husband, and when that doesn't happen, then she
why doesn't that
moves
happen?
on to another one.
Why doesn't that happen? Why doesn't that? Why if she did that to frame her husband?
Because the other killer was caught, so the investigation stopped. So they didn't think they needed to do anything, and now I'm assuming maybe she figures she has to find another way, and finally she just snaps and kills him right there, because that does show a sign of insanity, whether it's just temporary or not, because that's not the most easy way to get rid of somebody. I mean, there's evidence all over the place. So she just literally just snaps and kills him. And then I think Walter's used to get rid of the other two.
Do we think Walter killed Brenda, or was that her? Because Brenda,
I think she did. Didn't she mention that she killed her?
But we see her come up to Irina's room.
Yeah, but you can't rely on what we're being shown, especially in an Italian Giallo.
Oh, for crying out loud.
That's cheating.
Because I think at the end, I think she mentions, I killed your whore or your something.
That could be like 50
she
people.
Says that she kills her.
But I wonder if that is I had her killed. I don't know. It just
could be.
It's one of those because I'm just trying to think like what's the again it's all in service of the payoff and the misdirection, and I get that, but if her to kill her maid and then go up to her room and then wait for the maid to show up.
Well, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about this film is it's not, he's a deviant, the killer is a deviant mastermind that has plotted all this from the get-go. Right. It's someone that is slowly becoming unhinged, is trying to mastermind something with an insane brain. So
I'm not very good at this.
Right. It's my first time. I'll do better the next time.
I also love this one line talking about the cat. Well, it's about Satan. That little monster is diabolical. Just some of this stuff is kind of on the nose and really cheeky, and I really appreciate that. I like the idea of the two, possibly the two killers, if we're talking about Walter and Irina teaming up and alternating or whatever. But one of the special things about this film, and we kind of alluded to it earlier with Edwige Fenech showing up, a third of the way through it, and then not making it all the way to the end. I expected her to be the star of this movie, but I wasn't disappointed that she was not. I think this is one of those rare oddball ensemble pieces, because for as much of a scumbag as Olivero was, I was fascinated by him as a character. He's really pathetic, but yet he has this hold over everybody, or at least you think he does, until you realize that no, he's being manipulated this entire time on, from a couple of different angles at least. And Floriana, Irina, I could have watched a movie about this bizarre love triangle just coming apart at the seams without even the murder aspect, and just been completely floored.
Mind you, have a reality TV show nowadays.
Just watching a
family train wreck.
Yes. Someone should recut this movie as a reality TV show.
I think part of it also you
about like a motorcycle racer star.
Yes.
But you talk about Edwige Fenech having I think Luigi Pistilli is a great he has great screen presence. And I mean, if you kind of look at his filmography, I mean, he did the Sergio Leone westerns. He shows up there. He's in Cold Sweat with Charles Bronson, which is a great movie to check out, by the way. Bronson's great in it. Luigi Pistilli plays one of the gang in that. But yeah, he's an iguana with a tongue of fire. He's in that as well. I mean, he's a really terrific Italian actor that I don't think enough people talk about. Yes, Bryan, you're going to talk about him?
Not to mention his impeccable sense of style. In particular, that scene where he's out in the Italian sun with a fur coat and I think it's a red turtleneck sweater, and he's sweating his ass off, and he's drinking like some drink. Like it's just beautiful style.
But yeah, I think we're blessed with 3, 4 if you count Ivan, 3 actors who have just a ton of presence and a ton of talent. As you pointed out earlier, I mean, this is a different role for Edwige Fenech than we've seen. She's we've seen her be kind of hysterical and the victim, and now she completely has flipped that. She's absolutely in control, and she's sassy and she's smart and she's clever, and it's like, wow, and Anita Strinberg. Yeah. I agree with you, Bryan. I think she's fantastic, and she always seems right on the edge of snapping. But she
absolutely,
that without it feeling like it's a one-note performance.
Right.
One challenge I want to issue to you guys for future live streams. I'm continuously amazed at the titles of these movies that we have yet to discuss, and some of the ones we have. You just mentioned, Aaron, iguana with a tongue of fire. I'm convinced you guys are messing with me. So during one of these next live streams, I want you guys to come up with a fake Giallo name and just drop it in casual conversation as if it's a thing, and see if I can spot the fake one. Like, come on, that's not real.
Challenge accepted.
Yes.
Do we have any closing thoughts on your Vice is a locked room and only I have the key? I got the title right this time.
Congratulations.
I'll only say one of the alternate titles was Eye of the Black Cat, which I thought was more fitting. But I do appreciate your Vice is a locked room and only I have the key. My wife was asking, "Oh, what's the podcast about today?" And I told her the title, and she was like, "Okay." So I think it definitely strikes a chord whenever you say that title to somebody. I love this Bruno Nicolai score. It's very underrated. And as everybody has mentioned, I think it's an amazing ensemble cast. And the little touches that Martino puts in there, there's this nice little tiny tracking shot when Oliviero rips off the dress on Floriana. The camera stays there, and then they kind of lay down on the bed, and then the camera kind of goes over them, and then it kind of backs off. He's a very artistic filmmaker, and the cinematographer that he uses in a lot of these films are he's just really great. So just little touches like that make for an overall amazing viewing experience. And if you haven't, anybody out there who hasn't seen this movie, and apologies if you stuck it out to the end and we gave you all these spoilers or whatever, but it's an amazing film to discover for the first time, not knowing anything about it. So
yeah, and you can also discover it for free on Amazon Prime if you have it right now. So, well, I gotta jump off, guys.
YouTube for free as well.
Yeah, I guess so. But this is a true story. My son is unexpectedly up from his nap and he's crying upstairs, so I got to run. But I appreciate all you guys talking about this. I'm closing school early. I'm pulling the fire alarm on Accademia Giallo. But thank you for joining me as always. Thank you for watching. Those who've tuned in and out, we appreciate you. I forgot to mention you can join us in the chat, but you can also join us in the chat after this goes live. The recording is done. Keep it going. What should we talk about next month? Leave your ideas. We'll consider them. It has to be Giallo. We're not talking about Marvel or DC, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, kind of. But yes, thank you, Aaron Christensen of Horror 101 with Dr. AC, John Kitley of Kitley's Crypt, Bryan Martinez of the Giallo Room and Film Deviant, and I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. I appreciate you all. We will see you next month. And until then, school is out. I should actually end the broadcast before I do that, but